Elsewhere, the party was about to start, and the staff at St. Frida's Hospital, Neapolis, were preparing for another grueling few days. They approached the whole period with the kind of grim fatalism more commonly found during lengthy sieges. Carnival was exhausting, a non-stop parade of injuries arising from too much drink, too few inhibitions, and the unfortunate combination of both. Their own small sweepstake included categories such as most embarrassing injury, most preventable emergency, most ludicrous chain of events. This was one way to pass the weekend. Dr. Katarina Nielsen, who was responsible for emergency care at the hospital, had plenty of other things to keep her busy. Yesterday, for example, one of her best people, deciding he was unable to face another excessively stressful few days, had quit. Now, she was short staffed. She sat in her office staring at the staff roster, trying to stretch not enough people across too many hours in need of cover. There were limits to what she could expect. At some point, people got too tired and started to make mistakes. And each year, her people told her, Carnival seemed to get a little wilder, a little more violent, a little more out of hand. She had come to Bethel a few months ago from the core worlds, hoping for something less tedious and predictable. Sometimes she wasn't sure she had made the right decision. There was a knock at her office door. Katerina put aside her notes and called out, "Enter!" A sweet odor of perfume made her look up. The sight of her visitor made her rise from her chair. "Miss Becker," she said, "I wasn't expecting you." Hilda Becker, richly dressed and ornamented, poised and utterly beautiful, moved smoothly into the room and gestured to Katerina to sit down. Permission to sit in her own office. Only Hilda Becker could pull rank like this. She was head of the local guild house, and one of the most influential people on Bethel. She also happened to be Katerina's employer. The guild owned St. Frida's, as they owned large chunks of Neapolis. Only Jacob Roberts was more powerful, and Jacob Roberts and Hilda Becker were known to be good friends. "Forgive me the interruption," said Hilda. "I know this is a very busy time. I wanted to check that you had everything you needed." Katerina fell back in her chair. "Well, I'm critically short of staff. Short of staff? One of my best people quit yesterday. Couldn't face another weekend at Carnival. If you need extra funds, you can have them. It's not so much the funds as the quality of people available. I need specialists. You've advertised on the Cortex." "Yes, but people come here to enjoy Carnival," Katerina said, "not to find themselves up to their elbows in blood, bone, gore." A wave of the hand made it quite clear that Hilda did not want to hear more details, gory or otherwise. "Spend whatever you need, pay whatever it costs. The hospital plays an important part in maintaining the guild's reputation on Bethel. I want the weekend to go smoothly." She looked impassively at her employee. "I'm sure you'll do everything to make sure that happens." Katerina herself was less convinced about her ability to work that kind of miracle, but she knew that Hilda wasn't interested in those kinds of details either. When she started at St. Frida's, she'd quickly worked out what the working relationship would be. Katerina would present Hilda with problems. Hilda gave her the money to make them go away. In many ways, it was a satisfactory arrangement. St. Frida's had some of the state-of-the-art equipment these days. In other ways, it was not a good arrangement. Katerina hadn't yet had to present Hilda with a failure, but she wasn't looking forward to doing this when one inevitably arose. You should keep a little time free over the weekend, said Hilda, to enjoy some of what's on offer. Rich people, Katerina had noticed, had an amazing ability not to hear what was being said to them. She was not unused to wealthy people. She had grown up and done her medical training on Osiris, after all. And while her family had comparatively modest means, she had studied alongside some scions of the fabulously rich. She was not unused to companions either, had even engaged one herself on one sweetly memorable occasion. But the combination of wealth, power, poise, and beauty that came together in Hilda was particularly intimidating. Also, Hilda could fire her on the spot. Hilda scared the life out of Katerina, and she didn't know how to tell her no. I'll try to catch a concert or two, Katerina said. It would definitely be a shame to miss the whole party. Hilda smiled. You're not one for gambling. Not really, said Katerina, whose day-to-day life already carried with it enough risk and stress. What a pity. Myself, I enjoy taking risks. The console on Katerina's desk gently chimed. Incoming. Incoming. I'm so sorry, Katerina said, reaching out to cut it off. They can call back later. Please, feel free to take it, said Hilda. That carried the weight of an order rather than a suggestion, so Katerina let the call come through. Her heart sank when she saw a familiar face appear on screen. Anna Liu, 20 years younger than Hilda, but with that same deadly combination of wealth, power, poise, and beauty. One of those scions of the fabulously rich that Katerina had met back on Osiris. Her friend, Katerina supposed she should call her, if the very rich do in fact have friends. Katerina lifted her hand, hoping to signal to Anna that someone else was present and that she should rein herself in. Anna, she said with a note of warning, I'm pretty busy right now. Her friend's eyes sharpened, but her voice stayed light. "'Kay, you're looking so solemn." Anna raised a cocktail glass. How late was it exactly? Katerina checked the time. Mid-afternoon. Not late enough. Smile, she said. It's Carnival. Not until tomorrow evening, Anna. Anyone started drinking yesterday. I'll have to resign myself to being no one. Okay. You're my favorite someone. Can you talk? I have a favor to ask. Can it wait? I have Hilda Becker here. She left the implications of that hanging meaningfully and heavily in the air between them. Really? Anna craned her neck forward, as if to try to catch a glimpse. You do have such grand friends. Miss Becker is my employer, Anna, as you know. Anna looked back mischievously. I didn't mean to interrupt an important meeting. You're not interrupting, yet. Don't worry, I won't keep you. You said a favor? Mm-hmm. I wanted to know what your plans were for the weekend. I'll be working, I imagine, said Katerina, allowing a little irritation to creep into her voice. It's not a great time for the hospital. Oh, but they have to let you out and play at some point. Well, I'll see how I feel at the end of the weekend. All right, Kay. Enjoy your tete-a-tete with Miss Becker. I'll speak to you later. The call ended. Hilda, rather coolly, said, I didn't know that you knew Anna Liu. She didn't seem very happy about it either. Perhaps she didn't like the idea of Katerina having other friends in high places. Anna and her brother had inherited several of the casinos on and around the Platinum Mile. Only Jacob Roberts owned more on Bethel. Not that Anna appeared to take any interest in family affairs. She presented herself to the world as someone careless with her time and her money, someone who preferred partying to business. How did you meet? Asked Hilda. We studied together, Katerina said. I was at med school while she was at business school. We room shared. In fact, Katerina had lived in the house that Anna's parents had bought for her to use while she was away studying. Katerina had been astonished by that, her first real encounter with real wealth. She remembered going shopping with Anna once, on the spur of the moment. Anna bought a vastly expensive pair of shoes. When she'd seen Katerina's expression, she asked what the matter was. That's what I pay you in rent every month, said Katerina, an important moment for both of them. Of course, Hilda said. I forget your Central Planet connections. You seem so much one of us these days. I thought Bethel considered itself a Central Planet. Hilda smiled opaquely. It's getting there, she said, though anyone who knows anything can see that it's rather rough around the edges. Still, I understand that's part of the attraction for many of our visitors. A bit too rough sometimes, perhaps. It's only for a couple days, Hilda said. A lot of damage can happen in a couple days, particularly when you were short-staffed. Not at the kind of event that I host, which brings me to my reason for coming today. I have a small party happening on last night, you know. Of course, Katerina knew. A small party? The Guild's last night party was one of the most exclusive events on Bethel. People were desperate for an invite. And you're invited, said Hilda. Do bring a guest, if you like. She considered this. Not Anna Liu. She can be chaotic. Oh, thought Katerina. I wasn't expecting that. I don't know what to say. I'm very gratified, obviously, but it's going to be so busy over here over the weekend, and I should be available. I told you that money would be no object. A little steel had entered Hilda's voice right now. Hire whoever you need, spend whatever's required, but come to the party. Was it worth trying to explain again that you couldn't conjure the right people with the right skills out of the air? Hilda didn't look like she was ready to hear that. I'll do my best. I'm sure you'll manage, said Hilda as she rose from her chair. That's what I pay you for, after all. She smiled. I'll see you at the party. This was the problem with accepting patronage, Katerina thought. Watching Hilda go, you were not permitted to say no. One could spend whatever one liked, as long as you obeyed whims, did what you were told, and somehow achieved the impossible. Money no object, eh? I wonder what would happen if I put that out on the cortex. Joseph Liu didn't, in general, eavesdrop on his sister's calls. But there was something about the urgency in her voice that made him stop the door of her sitting room and listen. No, listen to what I'm saying. I want a room, and I want a room tomorrow. Whatever you have to do to make that happen, do it. I'll pay 100 platinum. Yes, you did hear that right. And if I have to, I'll buy the damn motel and make all the rooms available. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Yes, tomorrow. Thank you. The call ended. Joseph waited a moment or two in case there was a follow-up, and then tapped on the door and went inside. Anna, his brilliant little sister, was lying on the couch, eyes closed. Joseph looked at her sadly. Anna, as a girl, always had so much promise. She'd shone at school, gone off to the Central Worlds at 16 to study, went to college on Osiris, went into finance, and then their parents died, and she came home. And since then, her whole life seemed to have been knocked off course. Gone was the ambition, the drive. All she seemed to want to do these days was stay out, drink, sleep until the afternoon. He tried to be patient, but he wished she would set herself straight. That sounded angry, he said. She cracked open an eye. Are you listening to my calls now? They could probably hear you on the mile. Are you moving into the hospitality business? What? She said. Buying a motel? Oh, she said. No, nothing like that. A friend arrived this morning, and a room had been double booked. I was undouble booking it. For 100 platinum? I can do what I like with my own money, Joe. That was true. Half of the estate had been settled on her by their mother and father, and it was none of his damn business what she did with the money. She could drink away the whole pile, and it wouldn't, technically, be even remotely his business. Except that he loved her, and he didn't think this life of hers made her happy. Must be a good friend, he said, still fishing. Do I get to meet her? When I say friend, Anna replied, she's more a friend of Kay Nielsen's, really. So, no, probably not. Kay Nielsen was one of Anna's old friends from her time on Osiris, who for some reason had followed Anna back here. Joseph had met Kay once or twice, a doctor, serious and intelligent. Why she'd come to Bethel, he had no idea. He'd thought once or twice that there might be something between them, but when he'd broached the topic with Anna, he wouldn't have minded, he just wanted to know. She'd laughed in his face. Kay? Oh, Joe, no, absolutely not. I like Kay, Joseph said. I wish you saw more of her. Prefer her to my current gang, you mean? Anna's current group of hangers-on were the worst of Bethel's elite, in Joseph's opinion. 5 or 6 years younger than her, and not a single intelligent thought between them. I don't know what you see in them, Anna, that's all. You used to enjoy good conversation. That lot, they're dull. They have no opinions. It's all gossip. Nothing wrong with gossip, said Anna. You can learn a great deal from gossip. Joseph poured himself a drink and took the seat opposite her. So what are your plans for Carnival? I'm going to enjoy myself, she said. No change there, he said lightly, although he wasn't entirely convinced that she enjoyed this life of hers. Mostly she seemed to be doing nothing more than filling the hours. I see no reason to change, she replied. Then she seemed to decide to want to make an effort. She sat up, curling her legs beneath her, and smiled at him. What are your plans, Joe? She asked. For first night? A few years back, at this time of year, this big house up in the hills would be bustling with life, as they made ready for Mother and Father's first night party. That was where everyone wanted to be on the first night of Carnival. Planning for one of these parties was one of Joseph's earliest memories. Choosing the theme, sending out the invitations, picking out the masks and costumes. And then, on the night, Mother beautiful and funny, Father charming and expansive, all these happy memories brought to an end when their new flyer plunged out of the sky just short of the northeast perimeter road. The year after their death, Joseph had considered hosting a party of his own, but knew he couldn't face it. 4 years later, and he still couldn't. I guess I'll go over to the casino, he said. You'll miss out on all the fun, she said. You've seen one parade, you've seen them all, he said. You won't be there all the time? He shook his head. There's the party at the guild house, he said. He didn't want to go to that. Jacob Roberts would be there, satisfied how things had turned out on Bethel, and there was the head of the house, too, Hilda Becker. Joseph found her cold and calculating, but these days you had to be seen at the Guildhouse party, so Joseph would be seen. Although he'd taken the precaution of engaging a companion for the night to do the small talk for him. Maybe I'll come by the casino later, Anna said. Waste a little money. She wouldn't. She never came near any of their casinos. She preferred to waste her money elsewhere. You know, Anna, he said, at some point you're going to have to decide what you're going to do with the rest of your life. You have to put what happened to them behind you. She raised her glass. I've already decided. I mean something serious. I'm very serious about what I do. You weren't like this before. Before, Joe? Before you went to the Corps. You used to work so hard. We all thought you were going to do great things. I didn't like the Corps worlds, she said. I thought they were dull. Dull. The people, all the same. Their conversations, all the same. I know we think those worlds are so beautiful, so shiny, but... Hannah shook her head. Bethel is so much more interesting, don't you think? That's a long way round of saying that you got homesick, Anna. Perhaps I did get a little homesick. There's nothing like this in the Corps worlds. Everything is so smooth. Here? You like the rough edges, hey? He couldn't read this expression. Sometimes she slipped away from him, and he didn't know what she was thinking. Couldn't begin to guess. I wouldn't say that I like them, she said. I'm sorry you didn't like Osiris. Joseph had loved his time in the Corps worlds. The order and regularity of life had suited him. He'd planned to open up a restaurant on Shaban. He loved to cook, and he loved the restaurant business. I'd happily go back there if it wasn't for all this. He held his hands out rather helplessly. He'd been home on Bethel when their parents were killed, and he hadn't left since. Someone had to keep everything running, and Anna wasn't going to do it. Poor Joe, said Anna, trapped by inheritance while I have all the fun. You know, he said, Father intended for you to take a full part in the business. Maybe he could persuade her to do more. Maybe he might still get to leave here. Maybe one day, she said. Right now, I worked so hard for so many years, I intend to enjoy myself. Or maybe not. Joseph looked down into the glass. Do you remember, he said, the parties Mother and Father used to have? Not really, she said, but of course he knew she did. Maybe we should start them up again. Joe, she said, those days are over. They're not coming back. She was right. Joseph finished his drink and stood up. Don't get hurt, Anna. Hurt? She was looking at him in real surprise. What makes you say that? Those friends of yours. They're not that nice. Oh. She relaxed back into her seat. I see. I won't, Joe. Not that way. And the preacher said to the companion, Those ain't potatoes? A raucous burst of laughter jerked Simon awake. He had a cold cup of chamomile tea in front of him and a crick in his neck. The dining room had become much busier. Zoe and Wash were at the other end of the table holding hands. Inara was leaning against the doorframe, cool, distant, smiling, that quiet smile that always seemed full of secrets. Everyone was there, almost everyone. Simon said the first thing that came into his head, said what was always on his mind. Where's River? Kaylee opposite said, She's still sleeping, Simon. Okay. And what's happening? What else? Said Kaylee. Scheming. Now that you're back with us, Doc, said Captain, we can go through the plan. Ah, yes, the plan, said Simon, pulling himself more or less upright. I'm glad to hear there is one at least. I'd hold fire on that, son, said Book. We ain't heard the details yet. No need to be anticipating trouble, Shepard. It'll come looking for us by itself, said Mal. But it's a fine plan, as you'll know when I've had my chance to tell you. Stop fussing and get on with it, muttered Jane. He was flipping a pocket knife open and shut, open and shut. Far from being a house of God, said Mal, Bethel is more what you'd call a den of vice. That's my kind of house of God, leered Jane. My apologies in advance, Shepard, said Mal, for putting you in the way of maybe seeing all manner of unseemliness. Accepted, said Book with a gracious nod of his head. So, said Mal, the planet upon which we'll shortly be coming to land is called Bethel. Now, small world like this, more or less out on the rim, people most usually come for one thing. Might be farming, might be mining. Me? I'm here for the Horan, said Jane. We ain't here for the Horan, said Mal. Well, I am, said Jane. He reached across the table to spear his knife into an apple and bit down hard. Was it too much to hope he'd break a tooth, wondered Simon. Apparently so. Now, a man on this den of vice named Jacob Roberts put out a call on the Cortex for some people needed for a job. Seems Roberts owns a lot of businesses down here. You mean whorehouses, said Jane, mouthful. I don't, said Mal, and Simon, who had attended one of the best medical schools in the Central Worlds, taught by some of the most inspirational professors in their field, began to despair of ever learning anything from this conversation. He caught Inara's eyes. She didn't do anything as broad as wink back at him, but he saw the slight twist of her lips. Patience, she seemed to be saying. All will be revealed. Mal, said Inara, don't rise to the bait. Just tell us what the job involves. I'm coming to that, said Mal. First thing you gotta understand, Bethel got settled back in the day because of the minerals under the surface. Whatever it is that they dig up out there in the desert, people in the core worlds want a great deal of it. It's called verterium, said Wash. It goes in components for calibrating navigation systems. He looked around. What? Why are you all looking at me like that? You think I don't know things? That, said Walsh, leaning in for a kiss, is pretty much all I care about. I'll take your word on the components and the calibrating, said Mal. When I think of Bethel, I think of casinos, said Kaylee. You know, all those fancy people dressed up, spending their money like it ain't going out of fashion. A lot of people made a lot of money out of vertenium, said Mal. Verterium, said Wash. Whatever. It's called they made a fortune. And they wanted to live somewhere a mite fancier than a Dust Bowl mining planet. And that's where the casinos came in. The idea was to bring a little glamour to their world. Jane, finishing the apple, threw the core onto the table. I ain't following. What's fancy about digging rocks up from the ground? With the casinos came the hotels, said Inara. Some of them are very expensive. They attracted wealthy people from the Central Worlds. The more people who came, the more they wanted to do. There's the restaurants, the nightclubs, the shows, the entertainments, not to mention the exclusive resorts out along the coast. Money brought money, said Mal. Walk around parts of Neapolis these days, you might think you were in the core. He didn't sound very happy about that, Simon thought. So what's the job, Captain? More to the point, said Book. Which side of the law is it? Strictly legal this time, Shepard, as I'm sure you'll be glad to hear. That I am. I hope it takes us somewhere fancy, said Kaylee longingly. It's a security job, said Mal. Shipment of herbonium being transferred off-world. He looked at Wash. Anything you'd like to share about herbonium, Wash? We've hit the outer limits of my expertise, said Wash. I only minored in minerals. He shrugged. More of a hobby than a specialty. Not even a hobby, really. More of a near total lack of interest. Sometimes, Simon thought, sitting around this table was like watching an elementary class at show and tell. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his encyclopedia. He held it under the table and began to read. Bethel, he read. Location. Red Sun System. Population. 530,000. Main settlements. Neapolis, capital. Evansville, Nashton, Lauriston, Mount Grayling. Simon shuddered slightly at the thought of what these crappy townships would be like. But perhaps he was being unfair, and none of them burned passing strangers at the stake. Culture. Urbonium, said Book, comes in mighty useful in the manufacture of lasers. Geologist and man of God, said Mal. No end to your talents. I dabble, replied Book. Well, today we're dabbling in providing a security detail for that shipment of urbonium. This shipment has to be off-world before the party really starts, which, so I'm told, is this evening. Kaylee sighed. So nothing fancy then? Nothing today, Kaylee, said Mel. Economy, read Simon. Mining. Hospitality. Bethel's wealth derives from two main sources, the chief of these being the extraction of various rare minerals necessary for interstellar navigations. The mining operations are chiefly situated in the desert regions, located upriver from the capital. See entries on Verterium, Urbonium, Malfinium. In the past 2 decades, however, a rising proportion of the world's income has derived from the dozens of resorts and entertainments clustered in and around Bethel's main settlement, Neapolis. This, with the looser gambling laws on Bethel, has made the city an increasingly popular destination for tourists across the Central Worlds. At least it's not criminal, remarked Book. I gather that the casinos are only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the local economy. Just the very upper tip of that iceberg of interest to us today, preacher, said Zoe. Still, said Book, might be wise to bear in mind that there will be others in Neapolis with designs very different from our own. Hence the job, said Mal. Watch that shipment when it arrives at the train depot. Make sure it gets over to the docks before the party starts. Nobody else to get near it. Nobody else to get their hands on it. Why us? Said Wash. Is there no one else in the whole of Neapolis willing to take on a job like this? Why has it come up on the Cortex? Good question, said Mal. Right now, as I suspect you all know, that fine city is the cusp of its busiest few days of the year. Big party happening in Neapolis this week. Everyone who could do this job is either working already or planning on misbehaving. Culture. Bethel is chiefly known for the celebrations that take place in Neapolis over the weekend of the spring equinox. These events, which are centered on the part of the city known as the Platinum Mile. Oh, said Simon, as several things clicked into place. Carnival. His colleagues gave a small and not remotely complimentary round of applause. You're catching up, Doc, said Mel. Sounds fun, don't it? Said Kaylee. Hopefully Simon, picturing the alcohol-related injuries that inevitably ensued, thought that it sounded like hell. For some definitions of fun, he said, before he could stop himself. Kaylee's sweet smile faded away, and from the doorway, Inara frowned at him and shook her head. Why am I such a jerk? Was I always such a jerk and nobody told me? Ain't no fun to be had by anyone on board this ship until the job's been done, Mal said sternly. Me and Zoe? You too, Jane. We're to get this cargo safely from the rail depot over to the spaceport, on board the freighter, and make sure that nobody with differing designs for the shipment gets near it. Sounds easy enough, said Jane. He was digging pieces of apple out from between his teeth with the tip of the knife. Ain't ever easy, said Mal. You know, I could do with a fourth body on this ride. Wash? Said Wash. When you say body, wasn't to be taken literally, said Mal. But it's out there now, said Wash. The idea of it, literally and very unappealingly out there. Maybe the doc will come along, said Jane, wiping the knife clean on his shirt. Show us what he's made of. Maybe I won't, snapped Simon back. The room went very quiet. Is it me, said Wash, or has it gone chilly in here? Whatever. Jane snapped his knife closed and put it away. Not like you'd be any rotten use anyways. No, he wasn't forgetting that Simon could paralyze him. That River could, well, who knew really, what River could do. And all of that meant that the balance of power between them had shifted significantly. Did anyone else on Serenity know why? Did anyone else know that Jane had called the feds on them on Ariel? What would Mal do if he knew? Simon had worked out pretty quickly that there was no point running to Mal with his troubles. This was something he had to learn to deal with himself. It was part of what his life was like now. This sullen ceasefire with Jane would hold, for a while, but Simon wasn't banking on it lasting, and he wasn't sure yet what he was supposed to do should the violence break out again. Just hope it wasn't fatal, for him and for River? Shepherd Book was looking at him thoughtfully. Simon stuffed the encyclopedia back into his pocket, pulled out a pen and paper, and began to make a list of what he needed for the infirmary. Listing things was soothing. I just need the verse to stop throwing curveballs at me for a while, he thought. Let me get my bearings. They were short of bandages. They were always short of bandages. Simon half suspected Jane of eating them. You know, said Mal, the doc's not so useless these days. He might well come in handy. Book leaned forward in his seat, putting himself between Simon and Mal's sights. Simon kept his eyes down on his list. I think I'll come along too if you're willing, Captain. You sure about that, Shepherd? Said Mal. There'll be guns. But no need to be firing them as I see it, said Book. Always happy to lend a hand if necessary. Den of Vice, Shepherd? Said Jane. House of God, said Book, unperturbed. And there's my fourth man, said Mal cheerfully. Wash, you and the doc are off the hook. Book leaned back in his seat. Thank you, murmured Simon, who appreciated the small kindnesses even more these days. You're welcome, said Book. Might be a good idea to get some sleep while you're gone, though. I plan to, thought Simon, and carried on writing. And maybe, when I wake up, I'll be back on Osiris, and this long and truly appalling nightmare will finally be over. On the other side of the table, Kaylee sighed. All right, said Mal. Me, Zoe, Jane, Book. We got a meeting with this man Roberts in a few hours. Everyone else, once we're down, you're to stay on board Serenity. Oh, Captain, said Kaylee. The job should be done by the mid-afternoon, said Mal. After which... Horan, said Jane, a man confident in his predictive abilities. After which, Mal ignored the interruption, I might consider the possibility of a little recreation time. Kaylee's smile lit up. Shiny, she said, much mollified. Come to my shuttle, Kaylee, said Inara. We'll take a look at your nails before you go out. And while you're busy with such life and death activities, said Mal. I'm not, thought Simon, seeing Inara's expression. The only jerk around here. We'll be off to make an honest living. I suppose honest makes a change, shot back Inara. Good enough for me. As the captain walked past, Simon reached back and handed him his list. That's what I need, he said. When you're paid off, if you're paid. Huh? Mal stared down at what he'd written. Anyone ever told you, Doc, that your sarcasm is your least appealing trait? Oh, it's the sarcasm, is it? Said Simon. I was under the impression that it was everything in combination. Mal patted him on the shoulder. He beamed across the table. Don't frown, Kaylee, he said. Party later. He went on his way, whistling, leaving Kaylee and Simon in the now blissfully quiet dining room. How I miss the grown-ups, said Simon, when they go out to play. Kylie smiled at him. Simon managed to smile back. Bed? Said Kaylee. I can't cope with much more of this, thought Simon. Kaylee, Simon, she said, I mean, you should probably go to bed. Alone, to sleep. Oh, yes, of course, bed. He stood up. From along the corridor, a voice called out, a girl's voice, with a rising note of terror. Simon! Simon! Oh, Simon, said Kaylee. I'm sorry. Of course, said Simon, heading off at pace toward the engine room. Of course this happens now.